Last fall, voters in Portland approved an overhaul of the city's form of government, the first one in more than a century. The charter reform passed by a decent margin. More than 56% of voters said, yes, let's throw out the old system. Those changes are kind of quietly underway now, and we should see them play out in a big way in the 2024 election. But this week, a couple of Portland City commissioners floated the idea of pushing through changes of their own to the newly approved overhaul. It took exactly one city council work session for them to learn, not a great idea. First, let's look at the changes that were approved by voters. The city will be divided into 4 geographic districts. Voters will elect 3 city councilors from each one for a total of 12. The locations of those districts have not yet been finalized. The councilors would be chosen using ranked choice voting. You'll rank each candidate in order of your preference. The day-to-day duties of those councilors will change. Instead of running bureaus like they do now, the councilors will vote on policy, while the mayor and a new city administrator will actually run the city. So let's get to what happened this week. Commissioners Rene Gonzalez and Dan Ryan wanted to explore, let's call it tweaking, the charter reform and putting the changes up on the fall ballot. The whole meeting was pretty rushed and chaotic at City Hall. At first, the public was not allowed in. Then people there said they were called to speak to the council without really being told what topics they needed to be ready for. And it turns out some people invited by opponents of the charter reform measure ended up speaking in favor of it. So, yeah, it was kind of a mess. Let's start with Commissioner Rene Gonzalez. He led the meeting with reasons why he thinks parts of the voter-approved charter reform measure are a bad idea.
That it is important for us to at least consider whether the city of Portland can take another experiment, and that may go awry. We were looking at the impacts of Measure 110. Many voters, if they had their to do it over again, would do something different on that has having tremendous impacts on the city of Portland, on the streets of Portland. And when we look at these charter changes, we at least wanted to take a pause, reevaluate what voters approved, and whether there's anything we would submit to voters for clarification on their intent.
Commissioner Dan Ryan told OPB last week that voters didn't really know what they were voting on last fall, saying there were a lot of components to it, which is true. Ryan was hung up, though, on a poll that came out last year showing that more than 70% of the voters wanted to vote on each piece of the charter reform measure separately, not all as one package. But members of the Charter Reform Commission told us the measure is kind of like a 3-legged stool. It needs each part together or it all falls apart. So here's what they wanted to change. First, they don't really like the new form of government that has a weak mayor. Under the new plan, the mayor will not have a veto, just a tiebreaker vote. Commissioner Dan Ryan said he thinks that's kind of a bad idea, and that giving the mayor a veto provides checks and balances against the council. The commissioners invited Candace Avalos to speak. She was a member of that charter commission. She said, yeah, they talked about the mayor and giving him veto power.
We agreed that a mayor should have the ability to cast a tie-breaking vote if necessary, but we considered the mayoral veto option. However, we believe that a veto on top of the tie-breaking vote would overbalance the checks and balances between the executive and legislative authorities. And this was something that was very prominent in the listening sessions that we had with Portlanders. They were concerned about the mayor having too much power.
So they did not include it. Mayor Ted Wheeler weighed in, no surprise. He strongly supports the veto, but says he doesn't often use it. Ryan and Gonzalez also think the new council is going to be way too big with 12 people. Gonzalez says it's just too many councilors for a city the size of Portland, and he doesn't think there really are enough quality candidates to run to fill that many posts. The commissioners are also concerned about the cost of the change, with each councilor having their own offices and staff. The most recent proposal from the Salary Commission recommends paying the mayor just over $175,000, the city auditor $168,000, and each city council member $142,000 a year. They say they're recommending that level of wage because of the cost of living in Portland, but the numbers are not set in stone. A listening session is set for next week. Last, the commissioners don't like the form of ranked choice voting that was approved for choosing the councilors. This version is called single transferable vote. So you'll rank candidates in order you like best because we're electing 3 people from each district. A candidate will need to get at least 25% plus 1 vote to win. And then it gets a little weird after that. Any votes above 25% plus 1 are transferred to your next highest choice until we have 3 candidates pass the 25 plus 1 threshold. And congratulations, those are the winners. Ranked choice voting has become more popular around the country in recent years. In Oregon, voters just approved a different form of ranked choice voting to be used for Multnomah County offices. And a statewide bill is in the works for Oregon voters for next year. City commissioners invited an advocate from Ranked Choice Voting Oregon to speak. He said single transferable voting works just fine, and he added that city council needs to get their act together for voters.
Democracy is a dumpster fire right now. There are huge concerns at the city and national level, and to go back and forth in front of voters, it makes us look like a clown car, and it's not going to build trust. And I can't imagine that the implementation work gets any easier should these pass or not, or this goes any better with an even shorter, more compressed timeline if there are changes.
In the end, the city commissioners got a lot more testimony in favor of not messing with the charter reform measure that voters had passed. Dan Ryan pulled his support for the changes yesterday, and Rene Gonzalez said that without support, he will not send the ranked choice voting and the size of the city council issues to voters. But both said they do want to keep pursuing the mayor veto option, possibly with a ballot measure next spring. So here's my opinion on all this. I'm glad the idea of tinkering with 2 of the 3 charter reforms which just recently passed is mostly dead. I've interviewed both commissioners who wanted the change, Dan Ryan and Rene Gonzalez. I think they have a lot of good ideas for the future of our city. But trying to change the things that voters just approved for this new form of government? No, bad idea. It doesn't matter if they're right. They are the folks in power now, and it's impossible for this to look like anything other than an attempt to keep the power that they have. Now, they probably have the best intentions in the world, but there are so many other pressing issues facing our city. This is not one that they should be wasting their time on. Look, if it turns out the new Portland form of government is a mess, which it could be, voters can always pressure the new city council to make changes in the future. And if it is, I'll invite Dan Ryan and Rene Gonzalez to sit down for an interview on this show and explain in detail why I'm an idiot and we all should have listened to them. In the meantime, fellas, leave it alone. This is not the time to be tinkering with the first change approved by Portland voters in 110 years. At least that's my opinion. You don't have to agree, but you do have to communicate. What do you think? Send me an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The phone number is 503-226-5090. By the way, your feedback is what makes this show unique in the entire Northwest. You become part of the story. So please do share your thoughts. I look forward to hearing from you.